Jungle is one of the most volatile roles in the entire game. Pretty much anything can be played in the jungle, and it changes from patch to patch. So, for this video, I wanted to take a look at the top 2 junglers in North America. Tarzaned versus Shernfire. Which one is better? The first thing I'd like to touch on is something that both players do in every game. They will immediately drop a ward and base. The reason they do this is so when they base, they can swap their warding trinket for a sweeper trinket. This will allow your sweeper to come up quicker while still getting a ward down on the map. This means you don't have to wait for your first base in order to have a sweeper. You will have it on your first clear. This just allows for a little bit more impact on the map since you don't really need your second ward at all as the jungler. It's much better to have a sweeper and deny vision from a target lane. This forces that lane to play very safe because there's no way for them to grant vision, since there's no way for them to get vision without basing and buying a pink ward, or just waiting for their trinket. The ward that Tarzaned likes to place is more standard. This ward simply gives you as much information as possible. The ward will give you as much vision as you can get, and will detect early roams from mid laners, as well as being able to see the scuttle on its standard path. The ward that Shernfire places is a more aggressive ward. This ward will tell you if the enemy jungler is sitting in this brush waiting to smite steal the scuttle away from you. If the enemy jungler is standing in this brush, then you are able to fight them if you want, or you are able to kite the scuttle away from the enemy jungler. The ward gives less information, but it's more targeted information. There is a specific goal in mind for this ward. Tarzan's ward is just for general information. He's not exactly scared that somebody's going to come to the scuttle to try and smite steal it away. It also gives information on whether or not the enemy wards the scuttle, as that is the standard ward spot. Overall, they're just 2 different wards with 2 different goals in mind. Tarzaned wants to know whether or not the enemy knows he's there, whereas Shernfire wants to know whether or not a fight is going to happen. Another thing that both players will always do is start their buff. It is a possibility to start Raptors and solo Raptors to give your lanes priority, but this is never something that either of them opts for. They will always go for a scuttle after 2 camps and almost never concede the scuttle, ever. They will also oftentimes path through mid just to get EXP. They try to get a gank off, but if the gank doesn't work, then they'll just sit in the lane and push the wave with their mid laner. This is to get level 3 without being forced to take Krugs. Other times, if they think they can't do anything mid lane, they'll just do Krugs and then Scuttle, which will also give them level 3. However, it appears as though they prefer to take Raptors and path through mid. Shernfire and Tarzaned can play a standard clear or vertical jungle. Neither of these are an issue for the player. Tarzaned does appear to be a little bit better at vertical jungling simply because he does a safer version of it. Shernfire will often path immediately deeper into the enemy jungle without first backing up. It's a little bit more dangerous, but it's a lot quicker. Whereas Tarzaned backs out, waits for lanes to show, and then re-invades the jungle. As far as general playstyle in the jungle, Shernfire plays a very, very aggressive playstyle. He likes to fight, he likes to gank, he likes to skirmish. Tarzaned, on the other hand, prefers to dominate the enemy jungler. He will look to repeat gank a lane over and over again while taxing EXP. If a gank is not possible, he will power farm his jungle. He takes this EXP lead, goes to every scuttle, and looks to just outpath the enemy jungler from there. Tarzand's and Shernfire's early ganks also serve different purposes. Tarzand's ganks early in the game will often be just to get EXP. It also appears as though Tarzaned will tax plates a little bit more than Shernfire, though they both will tax plating. The player's champion pool is very similar. Both Shernfire and Tarzaned can play pretty much anything in the jungle. There are a few niche picks that each individual might not be able to play, but for the most part, they just stick to the meta and they're able to play anything that's in meta at any point in time. The biggest difference between the 2 players is the amount of risk that they take. Tarzaned plays a very low-risk, high-reward playstyle, whereas Shernfire looks to just snowball the game. He is looking to end the game in the first 8 minutes. He wants to make the game so snowballed that it is impossible for the enemy team to come back. This, however, requires him to take huge risks, and doesn't always pay off. This also means that Shernfire plays a more team-reliant game, whereas Tarzaned is often looking to solo carry. Occasionally you will see Tarzan pick a utility pick for his team, for example this Trundle game. However, most of the time he's looking to carry and take over the jungle. Another thing that's very unique about Tarzan's playstyle that I don't often see Shernfire doing is he will not wait in base for mana. Tarzan relies on blue buffs and Scuttle Crab to replenish mana. As you can see here, he leaves base with very low amount of mana and just pass immediately to the Scuttle as soon as it's spawning. Scuttle Crab is very important to Tarzan, where it seems to be less important to Shernfire. Another thing that Tarzan does very well is the discipline in his pathing. Oftentimes you'll see junglers just waiting for their camp to spawn while there's another camp up. Tarzan almost never does this. He will immediately pass to the camp that's up and not wait for a certain clear to spawn. If his raptors aren't up, he'll go somewhere else. He won't wait for raptors to spawn so that he can do raptors and then wolves, or raptors and then krugs. It doesn't matter to him when his camps are spawning. He just wants to do the camp, and then if there's nothing else to take, he will gank, or he will do a scuttle. He's never waiting for something to happen, or waiting for a camp to spawn. The only exception to this is either Scuttle Crabs or buffs. Sometimes he will wait for buffs to spawn if there's just a few seconds, or he will be there when a Scuttle is spawning. This is because he values buffs and Scuttle Crabs so highly. This is another difference between Shernfire and Tarzaned. Oftentimes Shernfire will leave his buffs up for a minute, or even a minute and a half or two. This never happens with Tarzan. He wants to immediately capitalize on the buff, and he wants to immediately capitalize on Scuttle Crabs. One thing that Shernfire will do that Tarzan won't is he will drag Blue and Gromp together. This could be for multiple reasons. Perhaps Tarzan is distracted or something. However, Shernfire is doing the optimal clear here, where he drags both camps together and clears them together. It's faster and it gets them spawning quicker as well. Another unique thing that Tarzan does that Shernfire hardly ever does is he will play to counter the enemy jungler's win condition. For example, on Rek'Sai here, he chooses to go to the bot lane at level 2 and gank, knowing that Jarvan will look for a level 2 gank early. Shernfire also plays the mid to late game very different from Tarzan. While Tarzan often looks to make picks and close the game out quickly, Shernfire is oftentimes in the side lane looking for farm, waiting for his cooldowns to come up. He plays heavily around his flash, his ghost, his ultimate, depends on what champion he's playing, but he will play very heavily around cooldowns, whereas Tarzan plays more around his team in the mid to late game. One thing that Shernfire will do that Tarzan will almost never do is he will go out of his way to sneak into a brush in the side lane to gank an enemy laner. This is a very risky play to make because you're leaving your camps unattended, and if the gank doesn't pay off, then you're wasting a lot of time and you might find yourself counter-jungled when you come back. For this reason, Tarzan will never take this risk. He hardly ever does it. One of Tarzan's favorite objectives in the game would appear to be Rift Herald. He will often do Rift Herald, even solo, just so that he can drop it with his team and make a huge play. Shernfire will often take Rift Herald as well, however, it's less common and he often would rather be ganking a lane. As you can see, Tarzan forces very hard on this Rift Herald play. He's not afraid of dying to get a large chunk on towers. As far as mechanical ability goes, both players are very talented and it's hard to tell which one is better. Overall, right now, I believe that Tarzan is a little bit better of a player. He's more consistent and he is a more disciplined player as well. I think this is reflected in the current 100 LP that he has on Shernfire on the ladder, though I'd love to see Shernfire prove me wrong and claim rank 1 from Tarzan. Let me know who you think is the better jungler in the comments below. Also, make sure to like and subscribe. Leave a comment on what you might want to see from us next. We love to hear feedback and ideas for future videos.